Hello and welcome to another episode of Exploring Evidence Education. This week I look at remote learning and making plans. By making plans, I really mean the issues around self-regulation, around pupils being able to organise themselves for remote learning and manage their own learning. With the demands of coronavirus, pupils are spending so much more time at home having to be independent learners. And what we know for many of our pupils is that they'll struggle to do that well. So I wanted just to dig into some of the evidence in this regard. The organisation I work for, the Education Endowment Foundation, very recently produced a rapid evidence review on remote learning, which is really helpful. I suggest you dig that out and take a look. Lots of interesting insights about how remote learning is most effective. One of the insights when you dig into the evidence was this review on the challenges of the online component of blended learning. And one of the aspects it draws out is actually the key issue for many pupils is the issue of self-regulation. That is to say, being able to manage your time, get organised, stick to your goals, to understand how to organise yourself when your teacher isn't in the room. One of the aspects of self-regulation, so if self-regulation is about being able to manage your emotions, being able to organise yourself and use really effective strategies and check on how well you're doing, one smaller aspect of self-regulation is your ability to manage your own time and to make some good plans. And this study by Hartwig and Dunlosky for 2012 is based around the study strategies of college students in the US. Now, of course, we can only make so many inferences from college students in the US compared to English students in the era of coronavirus. There are some big differences in terms of maturity, etc. But I think we can draw some common sense links between this evidence and our current experiences. And when you dig into the research by Dunlosky, it shows some stark and probably common sense differences between high achievers and low achievers. And one of the things that stood out was their ability to self-regulate, their ability to make plans, to meet deadlines. And the differences with low achievers is they worked late into the night, they didn't get organised, and they didn't plan their study time. And most teachers, including my experience, is that that's really common, and it can mark out the differences between those successful and unsuccessful pupils. And one example that struck me last week was an issue with my daughter. So my daughter's really conscientious, works really hard. She's been doing really well with her home learning. One thing that's coming up in a couple of weeks that spooked her a little is that she has a piano grade exam, which will be remote itself. And with the thought of that test and struggling as she was a little with some of her practice, she got, worried and just felt like she didn't want to carry on. She got herself into a bit of a tiz around this upcoming exam. And what we did, we had a chat, and she gets lots of support, obviously. But as part of that chat, we just made a practice plan of how we could focus on different areas of the test on a daily basis. And that alone was something to reassure her, and it also gave her one of the key tools she needed to recognise that, okay, this big scary thing in a couple of weeks, actually, if you break it down into actionable steps, you can get there and you can be successful. And it just brought home all those experiences that teachers have all the time, where we're having to find those strategies to help students, to model students through that process. It also reminded me of the research on metacognition and self-regulation. So the EEF has a guidance report on metacognition and self-regulation. And part of that research its cites is Zimmerman 2010 about being a self-regulated learner and an overview. And Zimmerman's research offers a handy list, I think, of how we can define and break down being a self-regulated learner, or just being a really good independent learner, being able to manage this remote learning challenge. Setting specific short-term goals, so it might be small number of practices that get completed, so that checklist and that kind of diary plan I arranged with my daughter. That's one such way that you can set those short-term goals. Adopting powerful strategies. So, in many ways, it's keeping it simple, but having those most high impact strategies. So it might be using flashcards, it might be self-quizzing, those approaches to independent study that we know seem to have the highest value. Monitoring your performance for signs of progress. And of course, that comes back to being able to make a plan so you can monitor how that plan is going. Restructuring your physical and social space. Obviously, some huge barriers for many pupils at the moment, remote learning at home, that were, kind of unforeseen in so many ways. But we also know that some of these issues are long-standing. So trying to do your homework with your phone in your hand or your phone on the table is always going to be a struggle for a teenager. And when we expect a lot of remote learning to happen via laptop, etc., we still have some of those issues. So removing the phone, having a table, having a study space, whether that's in the kitchen or a bedroom, that matters. And managing time use, as I've stated, that making plans is crucially about time management. Self-evaluating your approaches and also attributing causation to results and adapting future methods. So it might be that my daughter does fantastic in that grades exam. I really hope it is. And she can attest to how she practiced. If it doesn't go so well, she might be able to then revise it and look back at what aspects of her practice could she improve. But it comes back to the planning. Students struggle with planning. They don't do it independently. The teenage brain militates against being good at planning. So we need to support that and model that planning as much as possible. So what are the conclusions? Self-regulation is a challenge for every pupil of all ages during lockdown. So we need to tend to that. It's not just about tech access. It's so much more. Explicit support is required. So planning, time management, lots of additional nudges and supports, and it might be that we have to communicate supports to parents about how to do this as well, consistently and repeatedly. And then this modelling and scaffolding of planning, making it social, how we're sharing different planning strategies across pupils, how we might be using technology to kind of shine a light on some of the best practice, talk about it and evaluate it. We need to help children who've lost the structure of the school day to not try and replicate that and the big chunks of hours and bells. They don't have that, but we can chunk things down and help them manage their own time that bit more successfully. So I think the research is really interesting, and I suggest that you dig into, explore the evidence I've cited here too. One of the ways you can do that is you can go on my website. I'll publish a blog at the same time as this video, and this will offer the links that I've mentioned. You can also look at my Facebook page and interact with me on Twitter, where I'm happy to follow up and talk about this topic. Next week, I'll be looking at some strategies for remote learning. So hopefully this builds up a repertoire of some useful content.